She's East Coast, he's West Coast. She has 2 dogs, she has 3 cats, except reversed because I messed that sentence up. She works for an agency, he runs a product company. Rebecca Slatkin and Will Shipley have their differences, but they have one thing in common. They both work as developers who interface with interface designers. Are they up to the challenges of a joint presentation, or will their differences present challenges? There's only one way to find out.
Stand up with me. Stand up. Hello, I'm Rebecca. Will, I'm Will.
I'm Rebecca.
We haven't had a chance to actually practice this at all because I haven't seen Rebecca for 3 days. So this is going to be like jazz.
I learned that if you ever want to avoid Will Shipley, all you have to do is tell him that you're exhibiting some form of a cold and he wants nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't understand that. It's
avoid you at all costs.
Oh, I didn't get my keynote launched on my phone. Do you think that's important? No, let's just not worry about that. All right, boop. We did consider some alternate titles to this talk. So the second one is reference to a movie for those of you that are under 40 or whatever, because everyone's like, what is that? Is that a joke of some sort? I'm like, yes, it's a damn joke.
Oh, what a good slide.
Is this slide blank? Yeah, there's a missing title on this slide. Rebecca. What we tried to talk about was what we wanted to talk about was how designers, developers, and marketing weasels can work well together. Is anyone here from marketing? Because this will be my first of many apologies, if so. No? Okay, great. And then in the process of doing this, I realized I also just wanted to do random thoughts about design. So I went back and retconned the about slide.
Sure. So the biggest differences Will and I have, and I think why I think this.
The biggest differences?
Well, all right. On paper right now, is that I've always had a boss. I work for a digital agency based in Denver, Colorado. Before that, I worked for a few startups based in Boston, and then before that, a couple agencies. So I've always had a boss. I've always had at least one client. I've always had an investor, mostly. I'm always working for the man. And I feel I have always had a development team that are my equals, that are part of the process, and I don't pay their salary.
Well put. And I've always been the boss, and sometimes I'm the designer, and then sometimes I'm not the designer, but I'm always the marketing weasel and the programmer. What are our goals?
I don't know. Not to make new friends, that's for sure.
Okay, we're not here to make friends. Look, I'm not here to make friends. By the way, who here thinks it's really mean to ask what your favorite snack is and then not have the snack? Because I'm like fried sardines and I don't see. It's like, hey, do you want to do sushi night? Great, go get it.
We had it earlier. They just all got eaten.
Oh, are there? Okay.
Oh, the fried sardines.
All right, that's cool.
Those
Thanks. They're saving it for me. So the goals that we'd like to accomplish, hopefully in an ideal world, is we'd like to make great things and not waste each other's time. That is, developers and designers, not me wasting your time. I'm actually here to waste your time.
And also find ways that we can work better together. I think there are great organizations where the development and the design team work great, but there's a lot of teams that don't work well. And even the best teams, there's always room for improvement.
I have nothing to say about that slide. So I guess I'm going to start by talking about my history. We were originally going to interleave our 2 talks, but time. So they're not interleaved anymore. But Rebecca's going to jump in and make fun of me at various points. And then I'm going to let her talk and interrupt her. So that'll be fun. So way back in the dawn of time, there was this thing called Acrobat or PDF, and there was no viewer for NextStep. which was an operating system before you were born.
What year was that?
The year was 1992. Number one on the charts was, I don't remember.
I was almost walking by then.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like that deserves a slide. So I got a contract to create a PDF viewer for NextStep. And back then, it really wasn't a thing to have designers in computers. It was just weird. Like, you wouldn't think it, but literally there was no one that I knew who was like, I'm a designer and I work on a computer or with a computer or I do things for computery things. It just wasn't a thing. So I was the designer for a long time, which, you know, was funny because I'm not a designer. So I thought, well, maybe the best thing to do if, you know, I have to do a UI design and I'm not a designer, is try not to have any UI. Is anyone here from Adobe? All right, here's the second of many apologies. So I looked at the Acrobat Reader of the time, womp, and then this is actually an update I found on the web, version 9, womp, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like this is a reader. What is that? What's that top bar? Why are there 17 buttons? And then they're like, in version 9, we're gonna make it better and add another like 27 buttons on the side. And who can even use this? So I'm like, well, this is maybe not the way to go. So I have this law that I invented, and it's honestly, I mean,
Patent pending.
you've heard it from other people as well. I'm just trying to get it out there as my law. Look, I don't have any kids. All I want is to be remembered for something. So I came up with a modification to the law as well. And actually, really, this is much more, I got this from Mike Mattis, much more than myself. But hey, if I can have 2 laws, you know, for the price of 1, that's going to be great. So this is the interface I ended up coming up with. And it's weird, because it's just a window with your content in it, and you can read it. And it's funny, because it seems really obvious today. Like, you would think, oh, I'm going to make a PDF reader. I'll just put the content in a window and not do any other crap. But, like, obviously Adobe didn't think of that. Also, who remembers when the window buttons on the Mac made sense, and there was like a close button over there, and then the other buttons were over there? God, that was nice. Anyway, so the lesson learned is no need for designers. So thanks a lot. We appreciate it. There's Proposition Chicken's happening, and thanks for coming, everyone. Another lesson I learned is don't image search Proposition Chicken. So at the end of each of these little projects, I have a summary, and I realized this morning when I woke up, it makes this sound incredibly arrogant. So I'm going to try not to be super arrogant about this talk. You're going to keep me honest?
Yes.
Sure, I will. That's my job. Omni PDF, we actually, besides getting paid by the NSA or the NRO, we never knew which it was, but it was one of them. Besides getting paid, we also licensed it to Apple, and they shipped with it. They used it as the basis of their preview app, which is still around to this day. And then they licensed it from us again in source code form so that they could integrate it into core graphics. So I consider this app to be a success. This is where normally she'd take over, but we didn't interleave, so I'm just going to
Always my fault.
keep talking. It's completely 100% your fault, always. Well, but to be fair, if we're doing chronological order, you still weren't born yet or something, right?
Oh, yeah, I definitely couldn't.
Were you talking at this point?
Oh, always talking.
Yeah. You came out talking. OmniWeb is a thing probably no one's ever heard of. So OmniWeb was interesting. Again, there was sort of no real UI designer. It was worked on by a bunch of people, some in this room. Hey, Tim. I sort of tried to act as the UI designer, and again, I'm kind of like, well, the best UI is no UI. And then the problem is there's a ton of surface area in a web browser, and we were inventing things all the time. So, so then some guy, literally these buttons up here, some guy took pity on us from Lighthouse Design and just mailed us the button icons. He was like, I don't know what you guys are doing here. And this was state of the art at the time. So I thank him to this day. I don't know if it was Ray Ryan. you remember? He doesn't remember.
You mailed them the physical mail, or like email?
No, it was actually the horse, and
Oh.
they came, and then they just pantomimed the buttons back
Oh,
then.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Uber.
Yeah, we had Uber. So I thought, well, I have the qualifications to do UI design, and then I did that. So that is, whew. Now the thing is, at the time, like this wasn't as bad as you might think. Like obviously this is really ugly, but standards were lower. I don't know. There's not too much to say about this. I'm just sort of talking about when I was designing for myself, and obviously that's not really relevant to talk because I was interacting with me. But obviously what I'm saying is designers clearly are necessary, but back then the whole field didn't have them. But in the end, it was funny because we still got 2 design awards for it, which kind of shows you how. Why does that keep happening? Can we?
Apple's ashamed.
Even Apple's ashamed. Okay, did it? Okay, anyway, we got 2 design awards for it, and it was because back then nobody designed their apps, and oh man, there's a thing on the next slide. Nobody designed their apps, and so it was kind of like, well, you guys tried. Here's a design award. It was
Is it a participation award?
yeah, it really was. It was like, well, also, there wasn't much software for Next Step, so they really were like, hey, you wrote an app for the Next. Come on up here, get an award, Sonny. It was a little bit like Oprah giving out cars. So then, in 2004, I left Omni and started Delicious Monster with Mike Mattis. And we came out with this little app. And this slide was formatted correctly before I switched themes for somebody. Somebody wanted to switch themes.
I did you guys a favor. You should have seen the theme. It was rough. It looked like 3 slides ago.
Hey, stippling is cool, okay? Stippling is still cool. I told you that. Why do you have to argue in public? We'll talk in the car. Mike Mattis was a great designer, and I give him a lot of crap. And actually, it's funny because I've given him crap at parties and stuff, and had like complete strangers lean over to me and be like, "Hey, Mike Mattis is a great man. He creates great software." And I'm like, "Yeah, I hired him when he was 16. I know that he was a great designer." So he has sort of a cult-like following. But the interesting thing was Mike was a co-owner of Delicious Ma. And the way we worked together was very closely. It was this constant 2-way thing, and it was really one of the most productive relationships of my life, which is in many ways sad. But it was amazing how great it was to have the designer actually be totally invested in the product. It wasn't like, oh, I've got this sort of client. I'm going to come in, do some work, disappear. Which I understand if you're getting paid by the hour. Of course you're not going to be like, calling somebody up at 3 a.m. like, hey, I know I haven't worked for you for 2 months, but I got this great idea. Like, of course not. I'm not blaming the designers. But I'm saying that kind of relationship was actually really, really valuable. And I've thought about it a lot because like when he left, it cost me a fortune. He's like, I own half the company, give me a bunch of money. And so I think if I paid that kind of fortune to a designer today, they'd probably be willing to call me at 3 a.m. and give me ideas. But I don't have the extra like million to cough up for designers. Although that's about what you guys charge an hour now. I think it's up there. But the other fun thing about working with Mike was that he really just didn't understand the limits of what you could do with programming, and he was also very sure that he was right about everything. So he was constantly saying, like everything needs to be automatic and smaller and more less interface again. And it was really neat. It was sort of the first codification of that I'd had. The first person that was really clear about, well, what's going to be the best interface? Well, much less interface is going to be the best interface. I was trying really hard to find an actual physical example of something he had forced me, because there was a story about a button, and are we doing on time? Oh, 15 minutes, lots of time. There was an actual example of a button that I had, and he's like, can you get rid of the button and just do it? And I'm like, well, if I got rid of the button, I'd have to do this and that and that, and that and that and that, and oh, I guess I can get rid of the button. And he's like, great, nice talk. And then, he went off and did whatever he did. It's great to have someone like that constantly challenging you to make your interface smaller. And I think that's a very valuable thing on any team. Doop, 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 doop. Yeah, please. Oh, my God. Thank you. So parched. This was the invention of the front-facing shelves. This is Mike actually made a book about his designs for Delicious Library. He made a book about it, and this was his very first mock-up. And it's kind of cool. It's a neat story because Mike would come up with tons and tons of ideas and throw them out all the time. He 2, 3 a day. He'd write me and be like, what if we could drive a giant, one of his ideas was have a giant DVD robot that was hooked up to Delicious Library, and then if you click on it in Delicious Library, the robot actually pulls the DVD out and plays it for you. And we have mock-ups of that. So he did a mock-up of this and didn't show it to me because he didn't like it. And then the next day, coincidentally, I was like, what if the items are facing forward and we do real shelves instead of just having the, just sort of white background? And to be clear, every single media app at the time, every single collector app, and there were like 11, was just a spreadsheet. That's all they were. That was the interface to all of them. There was nothing that looked like this. And then we did this. So Mike, I said that to Mike, and Mike's like, yeah, I tried that. I didn't like it. And I'm like, well, could I see it? And he's like, oh, no, already threw it away. This is a true story. And I'm like, well, could you do it again so I can see it this time and show it to me? And then the next day he comes back and he goes, nope, I do like it. We're doing it. I'm like,
Artists.
But it's cool because this is one of those like sort of iPhone things where now 100% of media apps do this look. And you look at it and you go, yeah, shelves with items on them. Yeah, that seems pretty straightforward. Yep, that's what I would have done. Delicious Library was actually a big success for us. We made a ton of money. And it sort of launched this generation of lickable apps, very, very sort of skeuomorphic, very chromy apps, which a lot of people hated and some people liked.
Do you think you were part of obviously there was an influence there of the AstroTurf and the Game Center. Do you feel like you were part of that?
No, yeah, probably. I mean, we tried to take our cues from what Apple was doing at the time, largely, and that was very much the way they were going. I've never really tried to innovate in terms of UI beyond what Apple seems to be doing. That's all. I'm always like trying to guess what they're going to do next year, but I'm not trying to outdo them. And I think Mike was actually just an absolute expert at this. He was actually predicting what colors would be in for the next year, and he did it perfectly. It was kind of stunning. I'm talking a lot. You sure?
No more than usual.
Delicious Library 2, really briefly. Our designer on this, Mike had left to go do the iPhone. I'm going to invent an iPhone. Thanks, Mike. So he left me sort of holding the bag, and I'm like, oh, I get to design again. Yay. One of the things we hired a designer, Adam Betts, a very, very talented guy. I have never met him, which I think is really interesting. And one of the first things he told me is he's like, hey, I'm deaf. And sometimes it's an issue because I don't consider English to be my first language. And I thought, what an interesting concept. Like that. And so he was worried about idioms not coming across, I guess. This was never actually a problem with him, but I thought it was really interesting to think about things from that point of view, that it's almost like a different language. And even if you're designing for English speakers, if they're deaf, maybe it's different. Which kind of reminded me of some of Jessica's talk, which is coming next. Jessica, I see you. That's my first mention of Jessica. There's 2 in this talk. So again, I was like, well, how can I improve an app without a designer? And I thought, well, the cool way to do that is to just try to make things that don't require any surface area but are nice for the user. And so one of the things we did, for example, is we look up the value of every currency in the world in Delicious Library, and literally like 57 currencies. And we can then sort items by their absolute value instead of just by their numeric value. And as far as I know, we're the only app that's ever attempted to do this. And it's kind of cool. I don't know if this is the current prices for everything in the world. So if the Australian dollar is actually worth more, sorry Australians. Sorry Clarko, sorry Jonathan. Another thing we did is like we wanted to allow people to easily publish their stuff, and we're like, geez, setting up FTP sites is a huge pain in the butt. And so I wrote to Cable, and he sent me the code so that I could actually just read Transmit's preferences. So if you'd already set up Transmit, you could just with one click have it published to that website that you'd already set up, which was kind of cool. So again, these are things that didn't require me to actually do any UI because I'm not really a UI designer. So how did Library 2 do? We got one pity design award, which was, I think, the last design award they'll ever give me. And sales were okay. They weren't actually great. But back then, we still weren't really in the App Store, so we were able to do upgrade pricing, and we actually made a decent amount of money, which you can't anymore. So, how are we doing on time? Skip it.
No,
Faster. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster. The Library 2 box tail is actually a really short one because it's a negative tail, and I don't want to spend too much time accentuating the negative.
Your doctor doesn't want you talking about
Oh, man.
this.
Now, I can't really see the screen. I should really try on these glasses I got. They're so nice.
Where did you get them?
I got them at Jen's.
You're kidding. I've heard such great things.
No, they made them in like 10 minutes, too. And oh,
Wow.
thanks. Actually, that's the wrong distance. So the Library 2 box, we hired an artist to do the box for us, and we actually gave him all the assets. So all the images you see there that are kind of pretty were from our other set of artists. And we're like, can you just put this on a box? And he did, and we were like, okay, we need to change this text. Can you send us the original Photoshop files? And he's like, no, I can't, because I just graduated from school, and they told me never give Array your original Photoshop files, because then like they'll change it without you, and you won't make any money. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point, is I need to be able to change it. And he's like, well, we just don't do that. It's an industry practice. And I'm like, well, I've been in this industry for 26 years, and you just graduated, so I think I know what the... Anyway, the end result is don't be a dick when you're a consultant, because I don't recommend him anymore. Also, don't put your software in boxes, because it turned out literally all the boxes got shipped back to me a few months later. And they're still in my basement because I'm trying to recycle them, but it's really hard to recycle them like one by, because you're like, take the CD out, put it over here, put it, 5,000 more boxes to go.
Here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's right, Jessica Collier. Let's just let this slide sit for a minute, Jessica. This is a different mode of interaction, this website thing. And I wanted to talk about it because it's sort of the unicorn happening. The artist who had been doing my websites and miscellaneous other graphics for a long time, but not the apps, is a little tiny company named Capacitor Network. I have never met any of them. There's like 3 of them. They are like amazing artists. I just tell them sort of, here's what I have in my head. Imagine if unicorns landed and redid the Earth. And they're like, we gotcha. And they go away and they come back and they're like, here's 6 mock-ups, and every mock-up is perfect. And I'm like, I don't even know which to pick. It's like, what do you want to eat tonight? Sushi or spaghetti? I'm like, so good. I'm delicious. And then for this version of the website, the second version of the website, I had just hired Jessica, who had been languishing away, getting a PhD. And she kind of did the same thing, where she's like, all right, I got this. I got the words. And it was kind of funny, because it was like that this is a actual photo of Mozart and Salieri. It was like that scene with Mozart and Salieri in the movie where Salieri is playing the piano for Mozart, and he's like, here, I composed this piece. And Mozart's like, yeah, sit down, shut up. I got this, and plays the piece, and then makes it better, and makes it better, and makes it better. So there's actually a joke on our website where I read it, and I was like, this joke's really funny, Jessica, but do you, this joke that I wrote from the original website is funny, but do you still want it in the website? And she's like, no, I actually wrote that joke. That's a new joke. I just wrote it in your style. But I thought I had written the joke because she had picked up my style so well. So unfortunately, the lesson here is, if you hire people who can read your mind, then you're going to have a good time. So good luck. That's an option to go with. I don't know how to find people who can read your mind. What's that? Speed it up? Okay. All right, Delicious Library 3. We hired, what?
It's pretty.
Is it?
Yeah.
I hate it now. Originally, we had these damn ears. We hired Louie and Brad from Pacific Helm. Brad spoke yesterday. Thanks, Brad. They did a great job. Unfortunately, I just told them to do the wrong thing. At this time, people were starting to really hate skeuomorphism. But I was like, yeah, we'll do it even more 3D. So this is the first consumer app that I know of that uses 3D in it. And we had the Waggle, which now is on the Apple TV, so I was really proud of that. Skeuomorphism, for those of you that are wondering, is making things look kind of realistic. And unfortunately, it's also kind of frowned upon nowadays. So we shipped it, and we're like, yeah, how's everybody like that? And they're like, no! And I'm like, okay, well, how about that? And they're like, no! And I'm like, what if we just take out everything? Will you please buy my app? Are you not entertained? Here's the only part of the talk where I actually talk about working with the designer, so pay attention.
That was just warm-up, guys.
Because I have a minute and a half. So designers love pixels, I discovered, working with Louie and Brad. And again, I have to stress, they did an absolutely beautiful job, and I just wish that I'd had a better thing in my head. The thing in my head. Brad has this great term, by the way, called the inverted Tim Cook, and you cannot see it on this slide, which is sad. There's a gray line, and then underneath that gray line is a white line to make it pop. And it shows up here on the screen. If you guys could just all come up here one at a time. No? And so if you have something that's like embossed, then you draw a white line over it, and Brad calls that a Tim Cook. And then if you have a white line under it, it's called an inverted Tim Cook, because he's got the white hair. So
the only person with white hair.
yes, well, I mean, he's the one we think of, right?
That's true.
I mean, when I think white hair, I think Tim Cook.
Santa, and then Tim.
So working with these designers, I realized, and this is something I'd learned before, but is designers love pixels, so they give you art, and they're like, here's art, and here's a line, and I'm like, yeah, but at this point in time, we have like double res displays. So on a double res display, should that line be a half pixel or 1 pixel? Should the highlight be a pixel or not a pixel? And so I want to do lines of code, but they give me the artwork, and I sort of need the specifications. And I realized it's really important to say, look, here's how I generated this Photoshop mockup, not just the Photoshop mockup. Related to this, designers don't like it when I use PDFs a lot of the time, because yeah, when I shrink down a PDF, it's not going to be pixel perfect. But the binaries will scale to any device, so I love them. But and that's going to continue to be something that we argue about. I think programmers and designers argue about forever. And then designers like giving you custom widgets. So in this one little screenshot, there are actually 5 custom widgets here. Each of those things has special functionality, special drawing, special mouse handling, all that. So I had to write all those things instead of just dragging out NS buttons. Which would I rather do? I'd really rather drag out an NS button. But I mean, I did it because obviously the app is better this way. But it is sort of a push and pull thing. And one of the things I'm really happy about with this program, and it's one of the only times I've gotten to do it, is code by example. So we wanted to do in our list view, this is the list view here in the background, we wanted to make it so that the background was the current wood you'd selected, because we had 22 different woods you could select, because we're crazy. We're nuts. I don't know why we did this. But these are 3 of the 22 woods you can use in Delicious Libraries background. But that's too busy for the list view. So they were like, you can't even see it here. I'm sorry. The contrast is not good enough to model. There's actually a wood pattern behind it that's like white and stripy. So pretend that's happening there. So they're like, yeah, just make it white. And I'm like, well, I can't go through and make all 22 woods white, A, because that would double the size of my binary, because all the space is used by those woods. And B, because you can actually drag in your own woods in the app and use your own woods. Yes, we did that. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, it's like a week worth of work, and actually dynamically detects them, and Jonathan wrote that. He's right there. Thanks, Jonathan. That was great code no one ever used.
Every joke here is just too on the nose.
So I actually wrote some code. So Brad gave me a little thing saying, here's what I want it to sort of look like. Here's the contrast. And again, that just looks like a white square on your left, but it's actually white wood pattern. And so I wrote some code that actually does a histogram of that wood, then takes any image that's of brown wood and makes it black and white with the exact same histogram as the one he gave me, so it has the exact same tonality as the one you gave me. So I was really proud of that, and it's one of those things nobody ever notices. But it's something to think about as a designer. If you're saying, well, I want you to do this sort of effect, you might be able to say to the programmer, hey, actually program this effect. Delicious library summary. Womp, womp, womp. By the time we shipped it, it was an instant classic, which is not what you want in an app.
In the retro section.
Yeah. It did not do super well. I mean, another big problem was by the time we shipped it, nobody has CDs and DVDs anymore, which I totally get. I don't have them. You don't have them. So nobody really collects things anymore. And also, we couldn't charge for upgrade pricing because the App Store sucks. So, so we didn't do so well. Finally, I'm working on Delicious Dwelling, and I still don't have a designer. Dwelling was inspired by this iTunes 9 intro movie from 2009, where they were like, here's how home sharing works. And they had the thing on the left, and it was spinning around, and they're like, here's how you can share from Jesse's library to Steve's library. And I'm like, I didn't know Jesse was living with Steve. Jesse. But I'm also like, geez, what if that were a real app? Because this is all a pre-rendered movie on the left. So I spent the next 4 years, well, the last 4 years, the next 2 years thinking about it, last 4 years making this thing on the right. And this is rendering at 60 frames a second in real time, and is actually a live thing of furniture and stuff, so you can lay out your house. And I want to give a shout out to Linda and Leah, who both spoke yesterday, separately, but equally. Because I showed it to them, and they were super helpful with ideas. So they're kind of like almost my designers, except I haven't paid them. So are they? I don't know.
I'm sure they're thrilled about that.
Anyway, that's my portion of the talk. Thank you very much.
Here's your letter.
Thanks, Lauren. Phone. I'm going to sit and heckle you.
Perfect.
Oh, this is comfortable.
Will and I actually met only on Tuesday. We had a huge argument in the middle of a grocery store, so I would say if we get through this today, it will be pretty impressive. This is day 4 of friendship, right? 3?
Well, I haven't seen you for the last 3 days because you were sick.
Oh, yeah, it's true. So for me, unlike Will, I don't have the most concrete examples to discuss today. 1, because I don't want to be sued, and 2, I want to remain gainfully employed. Hey, Brian. Hey, bosses somewhere. But I know a lot about working with teams, and I think probably the majority of you have worked on teams, with a development team, a product team, a business, a QA. But I want to start with what I think we can all agree on is the biggest load of crap that it still seems to persist in this industry as some, like the beginning of everything that everyone needs to know about, and that is the software development lifecycle, which is old, sad, and I think probably why I think there's such a gap between development and design. If you're not familiar with it, it usually looks something like this. I actually paid $5 to get that template because I couldn't stomach importing some of the ugliest graphics I've ever seen for this software development lifecycle, which is, I think, says a lot about the software development lifecycle. So I'm here today mostly to talk about step 2 and 3. I think 4, 5, and 1 I'll leave alone for today. That's another time, another day in therapy. I think the pass off to design and development, I think, is probably, in my experience, the biggest problem. Every time someone references this, I think in a technical interview maybe a year ago, someone asked me, what can you tell me about the software development lifecycle? And I mean, honestly, like, what year is this? And I can't think of one example where just a handoff in a continuous development ever works. So yeah, I mean, the software development lifecycle is really what I would call a piece of shit. I removed my Trump joke from here. Just didn't think that would do some comparing and contrasting between Donald Trump and the software development lifecycle, but we'll leave it there. So I think what I was trying to find was like a really concrete example of this handoff. And sometimes it can mean a lot of things. It can mean design handing all the requirements and passing to development. In my world, if that were to happen, designers go on to next projects. I never see them again. Sometimes I don't even meet them. I'm remote. All the engineers at my company are remote. And it can be really uncomfortable. This was pretty much the most concrete example I could put together was someone passing off the design comps and all the user workflows, letting me know if I have any questions. And then, where did you go? Sometimes I feel like all the hours are stacked to flesh out these designs, and then there's no time to answer any questions or iterate or make some changes, or like we're missing 12 screens. And I think this really happens a lot. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So whether designers, and I do know the difference between a UI and UX designer, but for the sake of talking about the handoff between development, I am sort of grouping you together. I appreciate all of you and the specific things you guys do, but I only have 20 minutes, so just forgive me for that. So whether the design and the UX and UI team see themselves this way, this truly is, this is really where you are on the totem pole as far as developers see you, is you're this guy right here. You're the one leading the ship. Oh, sorry, I can't point. You are, and that looks a lot like the development process. Even the best development processes, it often looks like that, especially with a deadline and an investor with a version of the app that is crashing, and you have a CEO who doesn't understand anything technical and is just standing in the middle of the office saying, when is it done? I think we've all been there. And then there's always that one guy who shows up at 11 and is like, sorry, I overslept. With the sunglasses, he's just like, can I help with anything? And that's that guy. I'm usually the one crying silently in the there's no bathroom stall on this boat, but that's where I would be, crying. That's where I am. So yeah, back to this. The design and...
You got to get your $5 worth.
Exactly, that's true. The problem with this design and development too is I'm sure all of you know that when you pass something off to design development, it usually never is perfect. If you think about from my perspective when I first started my job, or even now, I'm pretty nerdy and incapable of, I mean, I can hardly dress myself. Like there's a guy at J.Crew dedicated to making me look presentable, named Topher, who calls me Ellen DeGeneres. And we actually met. He pulled me out of line in a food court in the mall, like that was nearby the where I used to work, and he looked at my outfit and says, like, we have to fix this. So,
and he works at J.Crew.
You're passing your designs on to me, someone who literally cannot dress themselves. So it's no surprise, on top of an inability to dress myself or really understand design, or even know what to look for, or appreciate, well, I guess I do appreciate it, but I struggle with it. And then on top of add 20 bugs, late deadlines, pressure, clients, blah, blah, blah. You end up with something, where'd you go? Like this is the first app I ever wrote, and I had to scrub out a bunch of branding, so. But I mean, look at the alignment, this is a perfect example of not the best designer, but also I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how to eyeball things. I'm looking now and I see everything's like misaligned, there's like such font inconsistencies, but you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning and I have no one checking up, as long as it's not crashing, looks good to me. And I imagine this is hurting a lot of people's eyes. And that's why that handoff just can never work long term. This is what could happen. So yeah, I think we can all agree that this just needs to go. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm not going to go through my chronological order. But I did experience a few years ago when I switched jobs from a startup to the company I'm at now, Universal Mind, I was frustrated because I appreciate design, I don't understand it, I wish I could do it, but I don't know how to make things pretty. And the reason I took my job at Universal Mind is that there was this concept of a UX technologist. And if you Google it, there'll be 45 articles that says like, why you should never hire a UX technologist. I don't really care. It was awesome. The only UX technologist that was there at the time was named Kellen Styler. Where are you, Kellen?
His name is Styler?
He's going to kill me. He wrote the Rise Alarm Clock app. He's incredibly talented. He's a designer by day and a developer at night who sort of fused these talents together. And we worked so well together. We were on a bunch of projects together at Universal Mind where this is just a little bit of the UX technologist role, but I called him the beautifier. And ultimately, it allowed us I could focus on the speed and stability of things, and he can make them beautiful. And it took a huge burden off me, and it took a huge burden off him. It was it played on our best strengths. And another thing is he had the street cred of, before I met Kellen, everything was just passed off to me. Anything I pushed back on design, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, like just go back to your cubicle. They wouldn't take a lot. They wouldn't listen to me a lot. But Kellen spoke their language. Kellen had the credibility. Kellen had the street cred that he could push back. And our projects were just so much better, so much cleaner, a little bit more open-ended, but we were able to like branch out a little bit of the confines of just a pixel-perfect comp that we had to copy. But this dalliance and this lovely relationship ended quickly because the thing about a UX technologist, someone dedicated strictly to making things beautiful, is clients don't want to pay for it. And it costs a lot of money. So, yeah. Oh, oops. So, yeah, there was only like probably 4 or 5 projects, and that role was really phased out. And Kellen just had to go back to being a boring programmer like me. And now he's off to better places now with a different company. But it was a huge bummer. But it gave me hope. And I started to see there was a common theme here of maybe there is something to this two-way communication. Because I don't think it was necessarily just Kellen taking all the burden off of me. It was that it was the communication between the design and the development team and being able to work back up the chain that I think was like the most telling. Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about this concept, communicate. I know it's scary. Talking to developers are scary. I don't blame you. So I guess, what is this? Oh, one of our things got, that's okay. Okay, all right, now we're good. Like, what happened? So yeah, we're scary, but I think, if you take some of my advice today, there are some social cues that I know when I am confused or I don't understand something or, I have questions. I mean, I'm pretty obvious about it. And I think a lot of developers are just like me, and we really wear our hearts on our sleeves. I'm just kidding. I know we're all very stoic people in general, and especially remote. Just swap that out with like a default Slack icon, because that's really it's hard to tell. I think sometimes when developers receive challenging designs, they don't push back because there's a sick need to like want the challenge and see if they can do it. And I think that needs to stop as much, because there's a lot of unneeded burden being taken on, and I think it has a lot to do with this idea of being passed off. But yeah, we all have nerd rage for sure. I know what you guys are all saying. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking like, oh, I don't just pass it off. I communicate. I talk to the developers. Like we're in sync. I'm not really like super sure. You might be. I think there's a lot. Oh, I see what it is now. So I mean, if we go back to this idea, I'm sure this is really common when you pass off design comps. I'm sure you guys are all really friendly people. Pass it off to your developer and say, let me know if you have any questions. I think for a lot of people that it ends there. And then it's up to the developers, which it should be a little bit on us. But I think there's a lot, since you guys are really steering the ship, and it's still, there are There are stops on the station, and you guys are before us. There needs to be a lot more than this. So I know it looks great, but really, meh, we can do better. And if you want some concrete proof, I can tell you there are some signs of trouble in your process. And I think the number one is how many of you, or you don't have to raise your hands, have received a build or like a iteration of your design and said, "What the hell is this?" I'm sure this happens, and I think this is number one. This is a big red flag. Number two, what happens when you are approaching a developer with some feedback, and this is the reaction? I think this has probably all happened to everyone. I have been that person many times. But I think a lot of it has to do with developers not feeling like the timing is off. Like when I am sending something to QA and I'm so worried about it not crashing, and I haven't slept in 2 days or whatever it is, and I have a developer come over and be like, I want to talk about the Y value on this blue button that is buried. I don't care. And I think it does matter. It should matter. But this should not be the time that you guys are seeing this feedback or making this feedback. And this is not the time that I should be addressing it. So talking about that. Also this, silence. If you've ever passed off a design and a developer hasn't said it, or a development team hasn't come back with anything, without any questions, you might be a genius, but I think you're in trouble. And you might not believe me, but I will tell you I'll give you a specific example. This is a few years ago, but of a design I received with the message, attached is like a 32-page spec doc, very thorough, very annotated. Let me know if you have any questions. No questions. Because I didn't even know where to start. And I think, not to say this is a very extreme case, but I think when there are so many questions, or feeling like that we are on so many completely different wavelengths, it's just, I'd rather just live in silence and cry.
In the bathroom.
Yes. I mean, ultimately, really, this was the only question I had about that design. And I left it at that. I left that in the unsent draft in my inbox with some expletives. But ultimately, I think a lot of developers feel this way, is like, what's the point? I remember trying to hint back at this, but it was just, the designer at the time, lovely person, just was interested in innovating, being different, but like being different in the worst way possible. Like a nested table views within table views, it was just a nightmare. And ultimately, it was implemented. I was young. I think I would have pushed back now because I can't work the hours I used to. But it got implemented. I knew it made no sense. I knew it was so difficult to implement. And then I think someone got a build of it, and my boss or investor was like, "What the hell is this?" Or this is so impossible to use, and it was scratched, and they ended up with a really basic, contact picker. So, but I'd like to talk about this stage a little bit because I went through this. The 3 stages developers go through when they receive a design that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to be as extreme as the example I showed, but step 1, confusion. Some of the signs that your developer might be really confused is when they ask questions like, are these designs final? Did business approve this? Or just, I'll figure it out. That's usually a state of confusion. And that's a perfect opportunity for you guys to jump in and say, do you have any concerns? These aren't set in stone. I think this reassurance, it takes away the challenge of it too, of like this gamification that I think developers have of like, I want to do this just because I'm sick and have no friends kind of thing. But I think this is a perfect outlet for you guys, for someone to step in and say like, let's talk about this. Sounds like, maybe things aren't completely fleshed out. Step number 2, stage 2, silent opposition. Now, this is usually when the developer has began development and realized that they're in some deep trouble. Initial concerns about the designs may have magnitude, but the developer often feels like it's too late to go back. Maybe it's like halfway through a sprint, if you guys are agile, and you're thinking like, I can't confess that this is a nightmare. Their developer probably has a lot of unsent drafts in their outbox. They're updating their LinkedIn profile, or subtly mumbling to you in the kitchen, like, what have I ever done to hurt you? So I would say that this is a clear indicator of this stage is when development seems really behind. And this is when communication is key, because if you're keeping tabs or you're staying engaged in the development of your design, you'll notice this. It won't be 2 weeks until someone says, like, oh, we're not going to make this deadline. You should see, if there isn't real progress being made, this is when it's in trouble. And I would say maybe it's the developer, but also it could be the design. Maybe it's just too difficult. And this is a great opportunity for you to prioritize what is most important to you, because that will definitely be worked on first. And that I think is just a good rule of thumb that I've started doing with designers is if a designer expresses to me what is critical and what is the most important, and that you should know most development teams will approach those things first. So really prioritize. I mean, I know it's hard to pick your favorite part of your lovely design, but try to, because at the end, when things get cut, you don't want the thing that you care most about or that is most important cut. Stage 3, developer has isolated themselves from design and UX team. Developer is usually reluctant to send builds or show progress to a designer in fear that the design team will take opportunity to further complicate an already complicated design. Like, I didn't want to go back to that designer because with the comp I showed a few slides ago, because I was afraid that he could make it worse. And I just felt like he didn't understand, he didn't respect interface guidelines. I knew he knew about them, he didn't care. And it was this idea of like, oh, like just because it's a challenge, but it's like, no, it's literally just a mind-numbing process. So yeah, that was definitely the stage where I went home and looked at veterinary school programs. Yeah, this is a long-term side effect of stage 3 is I call full-fledged deep shit phase, and some teams never come out of it. Be very afraid of a frictionless development process where you hear nothing, if there aren't any questions. That's when someone needs to intervene. So what is deep shit phase? Side effects of deep shit phase, I'll start with, are the design never gets done. Stuck in QA forever. But in even longer term, like a long-term side effect of this phase is that trust is completely lost between design and development. Introducing a design that isn't considerate to platform normalities doesn't just create technical debt and instabilities, you destroy the camaraderie between the two practices. How to avoid deep shit phase, or how to get out of it. Every now and then, even great teams will get into this like rut, and they'll get out without major intervention. But unless your team communicates, the more your team communicates, the easier it is to avoid this and to get out of it. Ultimately, it's not about getting new software. It's not about restructuring. It's just getting into the habit, and we don't like to do it, is talking. Developers don't like to do it. Designers don't want to talk about it. You guys don't want to be challenged for your designs. We just want to code. So we all have to undo some bad habits. Number 1 is treat your designs like a baby. I don't mean in a precious way. Your designs should be, you should be flexible with changing out your baby a little bit, modifying it a little bit, but treat it like you really care about it. Treat it like you put a lot of time into it. Treat it like it matters. And I think the most important thing is that you express that passion. And you wouldn't just pass off your kid to a babysitter and say like, see you in a month. That's how you should treat your designs. And that means that getting involved with the developers and saying like, how's it going? What's going on with here? That seems like you haven't, are you having trouble with this feature? I'm totally open if you have a better idea. This isn't really like that important to have this custom activity spinner. Who cares? It's a grocery store app. It doesn't matter. So this is a perfect time of just staying involved. This is staying involved in the health of your design. And again, this is an opportunity to prioritize. So at the last minute, when you get a build, when QA does, and you're looking at it saying, what the hell? Or a developer saying, like, I didn't get to these 12 things, and business is saying, well, we're shipping it no matter what, and your name is on it, you can avoid all of that. You can be in control of it. You can lead the chaos. And this goes along with also just working side by side. This is how it should be every day. You don't have to be, I work remotely. It's not always this jolly, it's difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. Be the ambulance. Rescue your own design. Rescue your developers, rescue your team. If you're checking in regularly, there won't be any last minute surprises, as I said. Be part of something that smothers the smoke before there's huge fire, because you know when a client gets involved, when the big guy gets involved, I meant boss, not God, that they'll just cut. They don't care, they'll cut. But I know you guys are all passionate. You're all very creative people, and it matters. And maybe it doesn't, maybe to the person paying for it doesn't care that the table view looks like crap, but you do. You spend a lot of time on it. So be that ambulance, get in there, say, like, how do we make this happen? And that doesn't mean like, well, I guess you're gonna work 100 hours. It means making tough decisions, but making them without waiting for an intervention from another part of the software development lifecycle. If you're remote like me, or maybe not remote, I have utilized Slack bots a lot with a designer. This is a new rule at a project I worked on, where no matter what, every day, I get a reminder. Oh, it's because it's Pacific time here, but 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I post a UX update to the channel, just to screen capture. The rule is, I will say, like, this is getting close to final. What do you think so far? Even if I don't have any progress from the day before, I upload the same screenshot. And that isn't necessarily because I want the designer to look at it twice. It's just establishing that habit and that accountability. And you can go after a developer too and say, like, listen, like, where's the screenshot? And it just keeps you, it keeps you aware of what's going on, seeing how it's formed. And I promise you'll see the smoke before there's fire. That's really worked well for us. It's worked well a lot for me too. And this dread, I used to have this like sick pit stomach, not even of going to QA, but of submitting a build to the design, just because I'm usually so burned out by then, or the last push, and it's like, I just don't care about RGB values. But if I'm doing this every day, it becomes more of a communication. It's less like I'm delivering something to you. It's more of like I'm keeping you aware. Like keeping, as a partnership. We're in a partnership. So, sorry, I'll speed up. Jumping in a hangout. It doesn't have to be some formal thing. You don't have to get everyone on the design team involved. You can just have a conversation with the developer if you're having a problem. I hate meetings more than anything. I'm sure you all do too. Just jump in a hangout. It doesn't have to be formal. No one has to record it. No, blah, blah, blah. You don't need iCal invites. If you're free, you're free. These are just some final truths. I know it sucks, guys, but the design and the UX team really dictate the enthusiasm developers have for their job. Use that power. If you don't care about your design, I can tell, because I can tell of how many workflows you didn't think through. I can think of if it's a two-dimensional design where you haven't thought about how it works within the rest of the app. I can tell, and it makes me feel like crap. And especially if someone says like, oh, well, I just look at whatever our competitor does or something. Like that makes me want to sit in the bathtub and just cry, because it's my time, it's your time. And we know bad design lives much longer than bad code. I know it varies, but if I write crappy code, I can submit it, and then I have to live with it. But if you design something that you're not really loving and it doesn't make sense, I have to develop it, submit it, QA has to check it, and then you have to, if you want to improve it, we have to go through that process again. Like when I write crappy code, I have to live with it and I can fix it myself. So really just know that even if you want to take the shortcut, it's probably going to live longer than you expect it to. And finally, just the platforms. I think so much of the feedback is wasted going back and forth of educating each other on platform standards. That, if I could give you anything from just the designers I've talked to, it's that this is the number one thing, is by the time we get past, I'm sure Android developers especially, I'm not one, they're so exhausted saying like, I know this is iOS, this looks good on iOS, but this doesn't work for Android. So getting past those, making those changes, that they don't even get to have the conversations of how things can be improved. So I would say if you learn anything, it's just master your platform and be really aware of it and ask questions. Utilize our strengths. I mean, we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different abilities. Some of the guys you'd never expect on my team are probably some of the most talented, creative people. I am not one of them, but utilize them. Ask questions. That's all I have. Oh,
That's
sorry.
all you have.
Sorry.
Well. Oh, look at that. Blank screen. I thought maybe we could end this on a high note. Only a couple months. Who's ready to get sexy in here? Thanks.